The cafeteria of the Galactic Military Academy buzzed with conversation as hundreds of cadets from dozens of different worlds gathered for their evening meal. The massive hall stretched nearly 1,000 feet across with tables arranged by species preference. Some aliens needed high-temperature zones, others required water-filled chambers, and a few floated in contained gravity fields. At a corner table near the human-compatible section, 4 cadets sat in uncomfortable silence. Minho Park pushed his food around his plate without eating. His dark hair fell across his eyes as he stared down, trying to ignore the pointed looks from nearby tables. Next to him, Suna Lee drummed her fingers against the metal surface, her jaw tight with frustration. Across from them, Hyun barely touched his meal, while Daeun Choi kept her eyes fixed on her datapad, pretending to read something important. They were the only humans in a class of 300 cadets. A burst of laughter erupted from a nearby table where Rick sat with his group. The insectoid alien's compound eyes glittered as he gestured with his forearms, clearly telling a story that his companions found hilarious. His chittering voice carried across the space. And then the human actually thought he could outmaneuver a Krellian fighter, Rick said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. Can you imagine? Those creatures barely understand three-dimensional combat. They still think in terms of ground and sky. More laughter followed. Thornax, a massive bull-like alien with gray skin and curved horns, slammed his fist on the table in appreciation. Primitive thinking for a primitive species, he rumbled. I heard they only won the frontier wars because they threw bodies at the problem until something stuck. Minho's hands curled into fists under the table. Suna reached over and placed her hand on his arm, shaking her head slightly. Getting into fights would only make things worse. The Galactic Council had already decided that humans were too dangerous, too unstable, too emotional to hold leadership positions in military operations. Every outburst would just confirm what the others already believed. Ignore them, Suna whispered. They're not worth it, but ignoring them was impossible. The mockery had started the moment the 4 human cadets arrived at the academy 3 months ago. It began with small things. Rolled eyes during introductions, dismissive comments about Earth's military contributions, pointed questions about whether humans could handle advanced technology. Then it escalated. Human tactical suggestions were laughed out of strategy sessions. Their simulation scores were questioned as errors in the system. Access to certain training facilities was quietly restricted. The official reason given was always the same. For safety purposes and in accordance with Galactic Council Resolution 7743. Resolution 7743 was the ban. After the frontier wars ended with a controversial human victory, the Council had voted to prevent any human officer from commanding mixed-species military operations. The official statement claimed humans showed reckless disregard for standard tactical doctrine and dangerous emotional volatility in combat situations. Reading between the lines, the message was clear. Humans were considered too violent, too unpredictable, and too primitive to be trusted with real authority. The doors to the cafeteria hissed open and conversation briefly paused. Corporal Ji-ho Kim entered, his human military uniform standing out sharply against the varied dress of alien academy staff. He was older than the cadets, probably in his late 30s, with a lean build and observant eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Scars marked his face and hands, the kind earned from real combat rather than training exercises. He wasn't supposed to be an instructor. His official title was Safety Observer for Human Cadets, a position created specifically to babysit the 4 humans the Council had reluctantly allowed to attend the academy. He had no teaching authority, no command position, and no respect from anyone except the 4 humans he was assigned to watch. Ji-ho collected his meal and walked toward the human table. As he passed Rix's group, he overheard their conversation. Did you hear? Liz, an aquatic alien with blue-green skin and gill slits along her neck, was speaking. Commander Velthar rejected the human request to participate in the Grand War Games next month. Of course he did, Rix responded. Can you imagine the disaster? Humans in a competitive simulation? They'd probably try to fight their way through a diplomatic scenario. Thornax grunted his agreement. The games require strategy, coordination, and discipline. Humans only understand aggression. Ji-ho's expression didn't change as he continued walking, but Minho saw the slight tightening around his eyes. The corporal sat down at their table and began eating methodically. "You heard?" Down asked quietly. "I heard," Jiho confirmed. "Commander Velthar informed me this morning. The official reason is that mixed human and alien teams would create unnecessary complications." "That's garbage," Hyun said, his voice low but angry. "We've scored in the top 20% on every qualification test. Suna has the highest engineering scores in our entire class. We've earned the right to compete." "Earned rights don't matter when politics are involved," Jiho said. He took another bite of food, chewing slowly. "The council is afraid. Fear makes people irrational." "Afraid of what?" Minho demanded. "We're 4 cadets. We're not going to overthrow the galaxy." Jiho looked at him with those sharp, knowing eyes. "They're not afraid of what you'll do here. They're afraid of what you represent. Every time a human succeeds, it challenges their narrative about us. Every time you prove you're as good as them or better, it raises uncomfortable questions about why the ban exists in the first place." Suna leaned forward. "So what do we do? Just accept it? Let them treat us like we're inferior?" "You keep your heads down and you keep proving them wrong," Jiho said firmly. "Not by fighting, not by arguing, but by being so good they can't ignore you. Excellence is its own argument." Before anyone could respond, Thornax's voice boomed across the cafeteria. He had stood up from his table and was staring directly at Minho. "Human," Thornax called out. The word dripped with contempt. "I have a question." The cafeteria fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to watch. Minho slowly stood up, feeling his heart pound but keeping his expression neutral. "Yes," Minho replied. Thornax smiled, showing his flat, grinding teeth. "If humans are such great warriors as your propaganda claims, why did the council need to ban you from command? Shouldn't superior species rise naturally to leadership?" It was a trap and everyone knew it. Any answer Minho gave would sound like arrogance or excuse-making. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Then Jiho stood up. He didn't raise his voice, but somehow his words carried across the entire hall. "The council didn't ban humans because we're inferior," he said calmly. "They banned us because they watched what we're willing to do to protect others and it scared them." "There's a difference between can't lead and won't be allowed to lead," Thornax snorted. "Big words from a babysitter." Jiho just smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Words are cheap. The war games will prove who has substance behind them." "Humans aren't competing," Rix called out. "No," Jiho agreed. "We'll be watching. And when your teams fail the scenarios, maybe you'll understand why the council is actually afraid." He sat back down and returned to his meal as if nothing had happened. The cafeteria slowly returned to its normal noise level. But the mood had shifted. The alien cadets seemed less certain now, their mockery tinged with something else. As they left the cafeteria later, Minho walked beside Jiho. "Do you really think their teams will fail?" he asked. Jiho glanced at him. "I know they will, because they've never had to fight for real. They think war is about strategy and honor and glory. They don't understand what it actually takes to survive when everything goes wrong. And we do? Your species didn't become spacefarers by playing it safe," Jiho said quietly. "Humans survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near-extinction events. We're still here because we're too stubborn to die. That's what they don't teach in tactics class." Minho thought about that as they walked back to the human quarters. Maybe Jiho was right. Maybe the other cadets would learn something during the war games, or maybe humans would just remain the joke of the academy forever. Either way, Minho knew one thing for certain. He was tired of being laughed at. The announcement came during morning assembly 2 weeks later. Commander Velthar stood at the podium, his reptilian features composed and dignified. His scales caught the light as he gestured to the holographic display behind him, showing the Academy's emblem surrounded by the symbols of 40 participating species. "The Grand War Games will commence in 3 days, Velthar announced, his voice carrying the subtle hiss common to his species. 12 teams have been selected based on academic performance and simulation scores. Each team will face the same scenario, and their responses will be evaluated by senior military observers from across the Galactic Council." Excitement rippled through the assembled cadets. The War Games were the highlight of the Academy year, a chance to demonstrate skill and earn recognition that could shape entire careers. Winning teams often received immediate officer commissions and prestigious assignments. Minho sat with the other human cadets in the back row, as had become their habit. He watched Rick straighten in his seat, clearly expecting to hear his name called for team selection. Thornax cracked his knuckles in anticipation. Even quiet Liz seemed eager, her gill slits fluttering with excitement. Velthar began reading the team roster. As expected, the names were all familiar. Top performers, cadets from influential families and species with long military traditions. No humans were mentioned. When Velthar finished, he paused and looked directly at where the 4 human cadets sat. Human cadets will be assigned to observation duty, he said. You will monitor the simulations and file reports. Consider it a learning opportunity. Suna half rose from her seat. Commander, we formally request to participate. Our scores qualify us. Request denied, Velthar said without hesitation. Galactic Council Resolution 7743 prevents human participation in command scenarios. Observation duty is appropriate for your status. That resolution is about commanding operations, not participating as team members, Hyun objected. Velthar's eyes narrowed. I am aware of what the resolution states, Cadet. I am also aware of the intent behind it. This discussion is closed. The dismissal stung, but there was nothing they could do. As the assembly dispersed, Minho felt the familiar weight of frustration settle over him. Corporal Jiho appeared beside them, his expression unreadable. Observation duty, Jiho said quietly. Could be useful. You'll see things you wouldn't notice if you were in the simulation yourself. We'll see everyone else proving they're better than us, Dayun muttered. Maybe, Jiho replied, or maybe you'll see something else. The day of the war games arrived with appropriate ceremony. The simulation chamber was the largest facility in the academy, capable of generating fully immersive environments that felt completely real to participants. Neural interfaces allowed cadets to experience everything from G-forces to weapon recoil, while sophisticated AI controlled enemy forces and civilian populations. The scenario was displayed on screens throughout the observation deck where Minho and the others sat alongside Academy, staff and Galactic Council observers. A civilian station home to 40,000 people suddenly comes under attack from unknown raiders using hit-and-run tactics. The defending team must protect the civilians, identify the enemy, and neutralize the threat while dealing with multiple system failures and conflicting information. Standard crisis scenario, one observer noted. Tests adaptability, resource management, and decision-making under pressure. All essential command skills, another agreed. The first team entered the simulation. They were led by Rix, whose tactical scores were consistently the highest in their class. His team included specialists in engineering, combat, and strategic analysis. On paper, they were perfectly balanced. Minho watched the simulation unfold on the main screen. The team materialized in the station's command center as alarms blared. Rix immediately began issuing orders, his forearms moving rapidly as he accessed multiple data streams simultaneously. Interesting approach, Jiho murmured, standing behind the human cadets. He's trying to gather complete information before acting. Isn't that the right approach? Suna asked. Depends on whether you have time for it. As if to prove his point, the simulation's timer showed the raiders launching a second attack wave, while Rix was still analyzing the first. His team scrambled to respond, but they were behind the situation now. Enemy forces breached 2 sections while Rix's team was defending a third. Civilian casualties began mounting. Rix adjusted his strategy, trying to predict enemy movements based on their patterns. But the raiders seemed to have no pattern, striking randomly and retreating before defenders could respond. Frustration showed in Rix's movements as his team chased ghosts while the station burned. 47 minutes into the simulation, it ended. The station was heavily damaged. 12,000 civilians were dead and the enemy had escaped. Rix and his team emerged from the simulation chamber looking shaken. Failure, Commander Velthar announced flatly. Next team prepare to enter. Thornax's team went next. His approach was completely different from Rix's. He immediately took his team on the offensive, hunting down enemy forces with aggressive tactics. His combat scores were legendary, and he moved through the simulation like a force of nature. But while Thornax chased enemy fighters, other raiders slipped past and sabotaged critical station systems. When the life support began failing, Thornax had to abandon his pursuit to save civilians. The enemy used the distraction to strike the station's power core. 32 minutes. 19,000 civilian casualties. Failure. Liss's team was more methodical. She established defensive perimeters and calculated optimal resource allocation. Her strategy was textbook perfect, the kind that instructors praised in theory classes. It was also slow. By the time her defensive lines were established, the raiders had already caused catastrophic damage. She adapted, but she was always 3 steps behind the chaos. 53 minutes, 15,000 casualties, failure. Team after team entered the simulation. Team after team failed. Some lasted longer than others. Some saved more civilians, but none successfully completed the scenario. The pattern was consistent. They either overthought the situation like Rix, oversimplified it like Thornax, or moved too slowly like Liss. By the time the 8th team stumbled out of the simulation looking defeated, muttering had begun among the observers. Perhaps the scenario is too difficult, one suggested. These are our best cadets, another said. If they cannot handle this, what does it say about our training? Commander Velthar sat in silence, his reptilian features betraying no emotion. But Minho noticed his clawed hands gripping the armrests of his chair tightly. The 9th, 10th, and 11th teams fared no better. Each had a different approach, but all shared the same result: failure. The observers grew more agitated with each unsuccessful attempt. "This is unprecedented," a senior officer muttered. "Complete failure rate across all scenarios." "The simulation must be flawed," another insisted. The final team completed their attempt. 8 minutes and 43 seconds. That was their time before total station loss. It was the fastest disaster yet. Commander Velthar stood up and addressed the room. "We will review the simulation parameters. All teams will have an opportunity to run the scenario again after recalibration." As the observers filed out, arguing among themselves, Velthar approached where Corporal Jiho stood. "A word." "Corporal," Velthar said quietly. They moved to a private corner. Minho couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw Velthar's body language shift from defensive to uncertain. Jiho spoke calmly, occasionally gesturing toward the simulation chamber. Finally, Velthar's voice rose enough to carry. "What would humans have done differently?" Jiho's response was quiet, but in the silent room everyone heard it. "We would have done what we always do. Survive at any cost, protect our people, and adapt to whatever hell the universe throws at us. Your cadets are trained to win. Humans are trained to survive. There's a difference." Velthar stared at him for a long moment, then turned and left without another word. Back in their quarters that night, the 4 human cadets sat together, processing what they'd witnessed. "They all failed," Hyun said, disbelief in his voice. "Every single team. They weren't ready for chaos," Suna observed. "They kept trying to impose order on a situation that had no order." "That Rix guy spent 20 minutes analyzing data while people were dying," Dayun added. "And Thornax just wanted to fight someone, anyone, even if it meant ignoring the real threats." Minho thought about what Jiho had said. Survive at any cost. Was that really the difference? Did humans approach problems differently because their history was built on surviving impossible odds? "I want to see the Frontier Wars footage," Suna said suddenly. "The real battles, not the sanitized versions they show in history class. If humans fought so differently that it scared the Council, I want to know why." "That footage is classified," Hyun pointed out. Suna smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "I'm the top engineering student in this academy. I think I can handle classified databases." Minho should have told her not to. Breaking into military archives was grounds for expulsion or worse. But watching 12 teams of the best cadets in the galaxy fail so completely had changed something in him. "Do it," he said. "Let's find out what makes humans so dangerous that an entire galactic government is afraid of us." The Academy's data archives were located in the deepest level of the facility, protected by security systems that would make most professional thieves reconsider their career choices. Fortunately, Suna wasn't a thief. She was an engineering prodigy, who understood systems better than the people who built them. It was 3 a.m, station time. Most of the Academy slept, though some nocturnal species maintained their normal schedules. Suna sat in the engineering lab, ostensibly working on a project for her advanced systems class. Her fingers flew across multiple interfaces as lines of code scrolled past. Minho, Hyun, and Dayun kept watch near the entrance. They'd volunteered to help, though truthfully none of them understood half of what Suna was doing. She worked with a focus that was almost frightening, her eyes reflecting the glow of data streams. "How much longer?" Hyun whispered. "Shh," Suna replied without looking up. I'm past the first 3 security layers, but there's some kind of adaptive encryption that keeps changing. Give me 10 more minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. Every sound in the hallway made them jump. Every shadow could be a security patrol. Minho's heart hammered so hard he was sure everyone in the building could hear it. Then Suna sat back with a triumphant smile. Got it, the military archive is open. She pulled up the interface and began searching. Frontier Wars Human Combat Operations Classified Recordings. Her smile faded as she saw the results. There are hundreds of files. Battle recordings, tactical reports, incident analyses, all marked as restricted access. Start with whatever has the highest security rating, Minho suggested. If they're hiding something, that's where it'll be. Suna nodded and opened the first file. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a view from a combat camera. The timestamp read 3 years earlier during the height of the Frontier Wars. The footage showed the interior of a damaged starship. Emergency lights flickered. Alarms blared. Through the chaos, human soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. Their faces covered by helmets, but their voices clear over the communications channel. Hull breach in Section 7. We've got vacuum exposure. Medical team is cut off. Route through maintenance tunnels. Third squad, cover their approach. Enemy boarding party detected, Deck 3. Hold them at the choke point. Do not let them reach the civilian shelters. The camera followed a squad of 6 soldiers as they ran through corridors filled with smoke and debris. They moved like water, fluid and adaptable, each person instinctively covering angles without needing orders. When they encountered enemy forces, the firefight was brutal and quick. What struck Minho wasn't the violence, though. It was what happened after. The human soldiers immediately checked on fallen enemies, provided medical aid to wounded hostiles, and continued their mission without hesitation. They were fighting to survive, not to kill. Next file, Suna whispered. This one showed a planetary battle. Human forces defending a colony world against raiders. The tactical situation was hopeless. The defenders were outnumbered 5-1, low on ammunition and had no air support. Standard military doctrine would recommend immediate evacuation. The humans didn't evacuate. For 17 hours they held their position. When they ran out of ammunition, they improvised explosives. When those ran out, they used the terrain itself as a weapon. They collapsed buildings to create barriers, flooded areas to slow enemy advance, and turned every street into a killing ground. Not because they loved fighting. The audio logs made that clear. They held because behind their lines were 3,000 civilians who couldn't be evacuated in time. Every minute they held was another transport ship that could escape. By the time reinforcements arrived, only 12 of the original 53 human defenders were still combat capable. But the civilians were safe. Every single one had escaped. File after file showed the same pattern. Humans fighting in situations that should have been defeats. Humans adapting to impossible circumstances. Humans making choices that defied tactical logic but somehow worked. One recording showed a human commander ordering her ship to ram an enemy vessel to prevent it from destroying a refugee convoy. Another showed soldiers rigging their own base to explode while they were still inside, timing their escape to the last second to ensure maximum enemy casualties. They're insane, Dayun breathed. They're absolutely insane. No, Hyun said slowly. They're desperate. Look at what they're protecting. Every battle, every crazy decision, it's always about saving someone else. Suna opened another file. This one was labeled Battle of Kepler Station, Complete Record. The timestamp showed it was from the final year of the Frontier Wars. The battle lasted 3 days. 23 human soldiers and 1 AI-controlled defensive platform against an enemy force that numbered in the thousands. The station housed 15,000 civilians from 9 different species, including children. The 4 cadets watched in silence as the battle unfolded. They saw communication systems destroyed, forcing the humans to coordinate using hand signals and runners. They saw weapons malfunction and be replaced with improvised alternatives. They saw soldiers continue fighting with injuries that should have been fatal. On day 2, when the enemy breached the outer hull, a human medic named Rivera continued performing surgery on a wounded alien civilian while the deck she was on depressurized around her. She sealed the room, completed the surgery and vacuum using an emergency suit, and saved her patient's life. Then she grabbed a rifle and rejoined the fighting. On day 3, with ammunition nearly exhausted and the enemy preparing their final assault, the human commander made a decision. She had her team rig the station's reactor to overload, then broadcast a threat. Surrender or everyone dies together. It was a bluff. The human commander had no intention of killing the civilians. But the enemy didn't know that. They withdrew, believing humans crazy enough to destroy themselves just to win. Pause it, Minho said hoarsely. Suna stopped the playback. The four of them sat in silence, processing what they'd seen. This is why they banned us, Minho finally said. Not because we're bad at combat. Because we're too good at it. Because we don't quit even when we should. It's more than that, Suna replied. Look at the casualty reports. Human forces almost always took higher losses than their opponents. But they also saved more civilians than any other species. The Council didn't ban humans because we win too much. They banned us because of how we win. What do you mean? Dune asked. Every other species fights to achieve objectives, Suna explained. Humans fight like every single life is an objective. We'll sacrifice ourselves to save strangers. We'll destroy our own equipment to deny it to enemies. We'll hold impossible positions because someone has to. That kind of warfare doesn't fit into neat tactical doctrine. Yun nodded slowly. And it scares them. Because if humans will do that for strangers, what would we do for our own people? A sound in the hallway made them all freeze. Footsteps approaching the engineering lab. Suna quickly closed the files and tried to cover their tracks, but there wasn't time to erase everything. The door opened. Corporal Jaiho stood there, still in his duty uniform despite the late hour. His expression was unreadable as he looked at the four guilty faces staring back at him. Do you know what you've done? He asked quietly. We needed to understand, Minho said. We needed to know why everyone treats us like we're dangerous. Jiho walked further into the room and closed the door behind him. And what did you learn? That we are dangerous, Suna replied. Just not in the way they think. Jiho studied them for a long moment, then pulled up a chair and sat down. Show me what you found. They spent the next 2 hours going through files together. Jiho provided context the footage couldn't show, explaining the impossible situations human forces had faced, the decisions that had saved lives at the cost of tactical advantage, the reputation Earth had earned during the war. The frontier wars weren't fought to conquer territory, Jiho finally said. They were fought because raider clans were attacking frontier colonies, taking slaves, killing civilians. The Galactic Council sent peacekeeping forces, but they followed rules of engagement that let the raiders escape every time. Too worried about diplomatic incidents to actually protect people. So Earth intervened, Yun guessed. Earth didn't ask permission, Jiho confirmed. Human ships started showing up wherever raiders attacked. We didn't follow Council rules. We didn't care about diplomatic niceties. We stopped the raiders permanently. And that scared the Council more than the raiders ever did. Minho understood now. A species that ignores rules to do what it thinks is right? That will sacrifice everything to protect others? Jiho smiled grimly. That's terrifying to bureaucrats who built their power on those rules. Daeun leaned forward. We need to show this footage to the other cadets. They need to understand why the ban exists. That would be illegal, Jiho pointed out. This footage is classified for a reason. The reason is to make us look bad, Suna countered. To justify treating us like dangerous animals. But the truth is that humans are dangerous to evil, not to innocent people. They need to know that Jiho was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. If you do this, there will be consequences. For you and for me. The Academy could expel you. The Council could press charges. Your careers could end before they begin. Better than living as... The Grand Auditorium held 347 cadets, 23 instructors, and 12 observers from the Galactic Council. Every seat was filled. The room buzzed with speculation about what the mandatory assembly would reveal. Minho sat with Suna, Hyun and Daeun in the front row, directly facing the massive holographic display that dominated the stage. His hands were sweating. Behind them he could hear alien cadets placing bets on how boring the presentation would be. I heard it's just propaganda, someone said with a laugh. Humans, trying to justify their barbaric tactics. Another voice agreed. Maybe. We'll finally learn why they're so emotional and unstable. Rix's distinctive chittering reached Minho's ears. Could be educational in a pathetic sort of way. Laughter rippled through sections of the audience. Minho forced himself to breathe slowly, keeping his expression neutral. Let them laugh now. They wouldn't be laughing soon. Commander Velthar entered from the side door, his posture rigid and formal. Behind him came Corporal Jiho carrying a data chip. The reptilian commander approached the podium while Jiho moved to the control station. "Cadets," Velthar began, his voice carrying easily through the amplification system. "Today's presentation was requested by Corporal Jiho Kim. It concerns human military operations during the Frontier Wars. This footage has been classified by the Galactic Council. I have authorized its viewing for educational purposes only." He paused, his scaled features unreadable. "What you are about to see represents actual combat situations. Some content may be disturbing. The footage is unedited and authentic." Velthar stepped aside. Jiho activated the holographic display, then moved to stand near the human cadets. He caught Minho's eye and gave a slight nod. "Ready." The auditorium lights dimmed. The holographic display activated, filling the air above the stage with three-dimensional imagery. No one spoke as the first scene materialized, a starship corridor damaged and filled with smoke. The timestamp read 2 years into the Frontier Wars. Human soldiers moved through the chaos with weapons ready. Their helmets displayed vital signs and status indicators that floated in the holographic display for the audience to see. At first, it seemed like standard combat footage, the kind shown in tactical classes to demonstrate proper formation and movement. Then the situation deteriorated rapidly. Hull breach Section 9, life support failing. Enemy boarding party, multiple contacts. Civilian evacuation incomplete, we need 5 more minutes. We don't have 5 minutes. The human commander's response was immediate. Then we make 5 minutes. All combat personnel hold the junction. No one gets through. What followed was not the clean, organized battle that tactical simulations portrayed. It was chaos. The human squad of 8 soldiers faced nearly 40 enemy boarders in a maze of damaged corridors where any wrong step could mean explosive decompression. The aliens in the auditorium watched in growing silence as the humans executed a defense that shouldn't have worked. They used the damaged environment itself as a weapon, creating choke points from debris, using emergency force fields to channel enemies into kill zones, and adapting their tactics every 30 seconds as new problems emerged. When ammunition ran low, they switched to close combat. When their communications were jammed, they used hand signals developed on the spot. When 2 soldiers were injured, the others pulled them to safety while still holding the line. 5 minutes and 13 seconds later, the last civilian transport cleared the bay. The humans immediately began falling back, covering each other's retreat with a precision that came from absolute trust. Footage 1 complete. Jiho's voice broke the silence. All civilians evacuated. 6 soldiers wounded. 0 civilian casualties. Enemy force destroyed or repelled. He loaded the next file. Battle of Kepler Station. 23 human defenders. 4,000 enemy raiders. Objective: protect 15,000 civilians. The new footage showed a wide view of a space station under siege. The auditorium watched as the 3-day battle unfolded in compressed time. They saw humans fighting in vacuum, coordinating without communications, performing surgery while under fire, and holding positions that tactical analysis declared impossible to defend. Thornax leaned forward in his seat, his massive frame tense. On the display, a human soldier with 3 broken ribs continued fighting because his position was critical to the defensive line. The soldier's vital signs were displayed clearly, showing pain levels that should have rendered him unconscious. "He kept fighting anyway. Why doesn't he retreat?" Thornax muttered. "He's compromising his effectiveness." "Because retreating means exposing a gap," Liz replied quietly, her aquatic features intent on the display. "And that gap leads directly to the civilian shelters." The next file showed a planetary defense. Humans outnumbered and outgunned, holding a position for 17 hours. The footage showed them improvising weapons, creating traps from civilian equipment, and turning ordinary buildings into fortresses. But what struck the alien cadets wasn't the tactical creativity. It was what happened during the brief lulls in fighting. Human soldiers shared their rations with terrified civilians. They sang songs to comfort children. They used precious downtime to repair civilian transport instead of resting. "Stop," Rix called out suddenly. "Stop the footage." Jiho paused the playback. Commander Velthar stirred but didn't intervene. "This doesn't make sense," Rix said, standing up. His compound eyes were fixed on the holographic display. "Those soldiers should have preserved their strength. Resting between combat is standard doctrine." "Why waste resources on civilians who are already safe?" Because to humans, those civilians weren't safe until they were off-planet, Jiho answered. And maybe not even then. Watch the rest, the footage resumed. The 17-hour defense ended with the successful evacuation of all 3,000 civilians. Only 12 of the original 53 human defenders could still fight. The enemy had suffered over 90% casualties trying to break through. File after file played. Each one showed the same pattern. Humans in impossible situations, making decisions that defied standard tactics, succeeding through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. One clip showed a medic named Rivera, operating in vacuum to save an alien patient. The auditorium fell completely silent as they watched her work with her own life support failing, her movements becoming sluggish as oxygen deprivation set in. She completed the surgery, confirmed her patient was stable, then collapsed. The timestamp showed she was unconscious for 4 minutes before another human found her and provided emergency
treatment. She nearly died.
Someone in the audience said quietly. She was willing to die, Jiho corrected. There's a difference. That patient was a Velian child. Not human, not from any allied species, just a child who needed help. Dayun felt tears running down her face. She wasn't crying from sadness. It was something else, something like pride mixed with grief. These were her people, her species. They were capable of such extraordinary courage and such terrible losses. The footage shifted to the final battle of the war, the one that had convinced the Galactic Council to ban human command. A human fleet defending a colony world where peace negotiations were taking place. The enemy had launched a surprise attack designed to kill the negotiators and resume hostilities. The human commander was offered a simple choice: evacuate the negotiators and survive, or hold position and risk complete fleet destruction. Standard doctrine was clear: retreat and preserve forces for future operations. The human commander chose to hold. What followed was the most brutal space battle in modern history. The human fleet was outgunned and outnumbered. They lost 60% of their ships in the first hour. Any other species would have retreated at that point. Humans didn't retreat. They fought with damaged ships, failing systems, and depleted ammunition. When one ship's weapons failed, the captain rammed it into an enemy carrier. When another lost life support, the crew fought in vacuum suits until their oxygen ran out. The battle lasted 14 hours. In the end, the human fleet was reduced to 3 functioning ships out of 28. But the colony was intact. The negotiators were safe, and the peace treaty was signed the next day. The footage ended. The auditorium lights slowly brightened. 347 cadets sat in stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Commander Velthar stood at the podium, his clawed hands gripping the edges. His voice, when he finally spoke, was hoarse. I was there for the final battle. I commanded one of the Council observer ships positioned at safe distance to document the engagement. He paused, struggling with words. I watched humans sacrifice themselves for people they'd never met, for species that weren't allied with Earth, for the abstract concept of peace. His eyes swept the auditorium. That is why the Council banned human leadership. Not because humans fight poorly, but because they fight with a totality that terrifies us. Thornak stood up slowly. The massive alien walked down the aisle toward where Minho sat. The entire auditorium watched. Minho tensed, unsure what was coming. Thornak stopped in front of him. Then deliberately he bowed his horned head. I apologize, he said clearly. I called your species primitive. I was wrong. Humans are not primitive. You are something we have forgotten how to be. Rix rose next, his insectoid legs carrying him forward. I mocked human tactics as... The announcement came 2 days after the footage screening. Commander Velthar's voice echoed through the Academy's communication system, reaching every cadet regardless of their location or species. All cadets report to the main auditorium at 1400 hours. The wargame simulation will be run again with modified parameters. This time, human cadets will participate as full team members. Attendance and participation are mandatory. Minho was in the training gym when the announcement played. Around him, alien cadets stopped their exercises and turned to stare. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken questions. Finally, Thornax approached, his massive frame casting a shadow. You will be on my team, Thornax said. It wasn't a request. Commander Velthar will assign teams, Minho replied carefully. Then I will request you for my team, Thornax insisted. I wish to learn from humans. If that means admitting I need your help, then I admit it. Similar conversations happened throughout the academy. Rick sought out Hyun to discuss tactical integration. Liz approached Daeun about communication protocols. Even cadets who hadn't apologized seemed more open, more willing to listen. At 1400 hours, the auditorium was packed. Commander Velthar stood at the podium with several datapads in his clawed hands. Corporal Jiho stood to the side, his expression neutral but his eyes alert. The Grand War Games will be restructured, Velthar announced. Teams will be reorganized to include mixed species cooperation. Human cadets will be integrated into 4 teams as full members with equal authority. He began reading the new team assignments. Minho was assigned to a team with Thornax and Rix, combining the human's adaptability with Thornax's combat prowess and Rix's analytical mind. Suna was placed on an engineering-heavy team that needed someone who could improvise solutions. Hyun joined a tactical unit that valued his strategic thinking. Daeun was assigned to a command team that required superior coordination skills. The teams were given 1 hour to prepare before entering the simulation. Minho sat with Thornax and Rix in a briefing room, studying the scenario parameters. The objective is unchanged, Rick said, his forearms manipulating multiple displays. Defend civilian station against raiders with system failures and conflicting information. I failed this scenario by analyzing too long, Rix admitted, his mandibles clicking with embarrassment. By the time I understood the situation, it was too late to act effectively. I failed by acting too quickly, Thornax rumbled. I fought when I should have defended. I chased glory when I should have protected lives. Both aliens looked at Minho expectantly. Tell me what you saw in the footage that we missed, Rick said. Minho thought carefully about how to explain. Humans don't try to understand the whole situation before acting. We accept that we'll never have complete information. We do what we can with what we know, then adjust when we learn more. That sounds like chaos, Rick objected. It is chaos, Minho agreed. War is chaos. Fighting against chaos with perfect order means you're always behind. You have to match chaos with controlled chaos. Explain controlled chaos, Thornax demanded. Everyone understands the main objective. Protect the civilians. Everything else is flexible. We don't plan every step because the situation will change every step. We plan the goal and trust each other to adapt. Rix's compound eyes glittered with thought. So we establish the priority, protect civilians, and allow each team member to act independently within that framework. Yes, Minho confirmed. And we communicate constantly. Not to ask permission, but to share information. If you see a problem, you fix it. If you need help, you ask. No ego, no pride, just survival. Thornax cracked his knuckles. I understand fighting for survival. But what about when choices must be made? When saving one group means abandoning another? Minho met his eyes. Then you make the choice that saves the most people. And you live with the consequences. That's the part they don't teach in tactics class. Sometimes there are no good options, only less terrible ones. The hour ended too quickly. The 3 of them entered the simulation chamber together. The neural interface activated, and suddenly Minho was standing in the command center of a civilian station. Alarms blared. Displays showed enemy contacts approaching from multiple vectors. System warnings flashed in red across every screen. Raiders incoming, Rix announced, already accessing data streams. Multiple attack vectors. They're using hit-and-run tactics. Life support is fluctuating, Minho added, checking secondary systems. Looks like sabotage. They had agents on the station before the attack. Thornax studied tactical displays. Standard doctrine says establish defensive perimeter and wait for reinforcements. Reinforcements won't arrive in time, Minho said. We have what we have. Rix, can you identify their pattern? There is no pattern, Rix replied, frustration creeping into his voice. Then he stopped, remembering. No, that is their pattern. Random attacks to create chaos. Right, Minho agreed. So we don't try to predict them. We cover the critical areas and react to threats as they appear. Rix, you coordinate information and keep us updated on enemy movements. Thornax, you lead the combat response. I'll handle damage control and civilian evacuation. Who commands? Thornax asked. We all do, Minho said. Whoever sees a problem first acts first. No waiting for permission, they split up. Minho ran toward the damaged sections where civilians were trapped. He found a group of 50 people separated from the evacuation routes by a hull breach. Standard procedure was to wait for engineering teams to seal the breach. Minho didn't wait. He found an emergency force field generator, rerouted power from non-essential systems, and created a temporary bridge across the breached section. It wasn't pretty and it wouldn't last long, but it worked. The civilians crossed to safety. Meanwhile, Thornax encountered enemy raiders trying to sabotage the station's power core. His first instinct was to charge in and destroy them. Instead, he remembered the footage. The humans who held positions rather than seeking glory. Thornax took a defensive stance between the raiders and the power core. He didn't pursue when they retreated. He didn't leave his post even when they tried to draw him away. He held the line and the power core remained secure. Rix coordinated from the command center, feeding information to both his teammates and the other teams in the simulation. When he noticed 3 enemy ships clustering near the civilian docking bay, he didn't waste time analyzing why. He simply warned everyone and suggested reinforcing that area. The simulation progressed in controlled chaos. Problems emerged constantly. Systems failed. New threats appeared. Information was always incomplete. But the team adapted. When communications went down, they used the emergency frequency that Minho had set up as a backup before the attack even started. When ammunition ran low, Thornax switched to close combat while Minho found a storage cache and redirected supplies. When Rix's analytical approach was too slow for a crisis, Minho made the immediate call and explained his reasoning after. Other teams were operating similarly. Suna's engineering team solved problems at a speed that surprised their alien teammates. When a critical system failed, Suna didn't wait for approval to implement an unorthodox fix. She just did it and it worked. Hyun's tactical team learned to value speed over perfection. When the enemy changed tactics, Hyun didn't spend 20 minutes analyzing the change. He adjusted their response in real time and refined it as they learned. Or Daeun's command team discovered that communication wasn't about transmitting orders but about sharing information that let everyone make better decisions. She kept all teams informed of the overall situation without micromanaging their responses. The simulation ran for 93 minutes. When it ended, the results displayed across every screen in the observation deck. 7 teams had successfully completed the scenario. All 7 included human team members. The 5 teams without humans had improved significantly from their first attempts, but still failed to protect enough civilians. Commander Velthar studied the results with an unreadable expression. Around him, Galactic Council observers muttered among themselves. Some looked impressed. Others looked concerned. A few looked afraid. When the teams emerged from the simulation chamber, they were exhausted but triumphant. Thornax gripped Minho's shoulder with enough force to bruise, his version of a congratulatory gesture. "We did it," Thornax said with genuine warmth. Together, Rix approached more carefully, his insectoid features showing something that might have been respect. "You taught me that analysis has a cost. Speed matters. Sometimes acting with partial information is better than waiting for complete information. And you taught me that having someone who can see patterns is valuable," Minho replied honestly. "We needed both approaches. That's why we succeeded." Commander Velthar called all cadets to attention. Today, 7 teams succeeded in a scenario that previously defeated all 12 teams. The difference was not better technology or superior numbers. The difference was human integration. He paused, letting that truth settle over the assembled cadets. "I have prepared a formal report for the Galactic Council. I will recommend that Resolution 7743, the ban on human military leadership, be reviewed and revised based on what we have learned here." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some aliens cheered. Others looked uncertain. The political implications were enormous. More